Hi there, so today we're going to look at a unique issue. I've got a problem with my ball trough on the Supersonic from Bally. The issue is it's not ejecting the ball when it's time to start a new ball. Let me take you through what I'm seeing. So if I start a new game, okay, flippers work. When I drop the ball down, there's the drop targets fire, which makes me think there's some kind of confusion in terms of the solenoid that should be firing. But if I flick it over with my hand, I can fire off and play a game. Let's get a couple of bonuses just so you can see that it fires off. And if I drain the ball, it registers the end of the ball. And the interesting thing is that the ball doesn't kick out, so we have a problem. So if I go in, the first thing to test here is, well, is that switch registering? Well, if we go into switch test, it registers 8 when I drop a ball in, but it doesn't seem to be very reliable. That's 8. If I push it down, it's registering 8. It really doesn't seem to be that reliable. So that's another thing to check on the switch test. And then the last thing to do is let's have a look and see if this fires if I go into the solenoid test again. So it's the third hit. So when you put this in solenoid test, it cycles through all of the solenoids. So if you have a look at the manual, which I'll pop up on the screen, the out hole is solenoid 1. So it is not working here at all. So let's take the back box out. Open up the back box. And so here you've got all the boards. This is where all the transistors are. If I zoom into that, each of these transistors represent a solenoid. You can test solenoids working by plugging one side to the ground of your onto the ground braid, which I've done if I zoom out. So I've got the ground braid, just clip that on. And then I'll zoom in to each of these. Now, if I touch each of these, so that's the knocker, and that, which is Q4, is the out hole. And so every time I do that, I'll show you what happens by just zooming down into this. Okay, I'm going to do exactly the same thing again with my little thing on, just touching it. So that implies that the connectivity between the transistor and the coil is actually working fine. So that means I'm even a little bit more confused. So let me have another look and see how we go from there. I'm going to take this board out quickly here. So let's get these two screws out in fact. One. Just got these little board holders. There we go, board out. Looks like quite a lot of work's been done on this actually. This is interesting because There's a lot of work that's been done on the back. So I have to just check out what's going on here, because there's some interesting hacks or fixes that have been done. It'll be interesting to. That's been refurbished in 2000, so 19 years ago. So let's have a look and see if there's anything on here that potentially is creating this intermittent problem we've got. Okay, so board's out, and there's clearly some work that's been done on it. I'm going to have a look through that. There's this glue which has been done to hold some of these wires down, which I'm not a massive fan of, but I suppose it does perform a job. But not a great fan of this stuff, so I'm just going to get it off. Ironically enough, I've done another video on hack jobs that I saw on my Scared Stiff, where someone had glued on some capacitors rather than using the correct capacitors, and I never thought I'd ever need to get glue off of a circuit board again. But clearly it's more of a thing than I thought. This is a weird kind of epoxy type of it. Glue. Conscious, I don't want to damage any of the traces. Okay. So it's this here, I believe, which is Q4. This one here, transistor Q4, is the exact driver that I'm having issues with. So the other thing is that this J3 there's a whole lot of connectors which seem to be connected to one another, and it looks like that's normal, but I'm going to just go through. Some of these solder joints look a bit ropey, and see if a little bit of TLC can revive this. So let's get stuck into that. Let's get the flux out. I'm going to start up here on these. Okay. Yeah, under the magnifying glass, some of these don't look great. So I've decided just to replace these header pins because they just don't look that flash hot. So I've heated up my desolder gun, and I'm just going to go through and take each of them out. It's as simple as that. The header pin just pops out now. They're okay, but they just wanted to go and have a look at, make sure that all of this is working properly. And clean it up nicely. So this is obviously because this trace from pin, what is that, pin 4 that goes down. So you can see this was on pin 4. This wire was soldered onto pin 4, and it's because this trace is vaporized over time. So that's what this repair is that comes across down to the bottom of the board. So that's what this is trying to repair. The trace wields its way all the way around. We'll just resolder that with a fresh set of pins. It's 25, but before that I'm just going to give this a bit of a clean. I've got some solder wick and I'll just clean that up just quickly here as well. Just give it a bit of a run through, just to get it nice and clean, and then I'll put the new pins in. And this just draws the extra solder up off the board into the copper and just cleans the pads. Gets rid of all the extra solder. Okay, so that's just a bit cleaner now. I've got the pins cut to size. I'm going to give this just a bit of a clean. Okay, that's the top cleaned. Clean the bottom as well. So there's a couple of traces. If you look in here, you can see there's a couple of the pads that are gone. So pad 1, 2, 3 and 7 are damaged or missing, so we have to be a bit careful with this pad. If you look, fortunately, if you look in the manual, you'll see that not used. Pin 1 is not used, pin 2 is the key, so that's not used, pin 4 is not used, but pin 7 is not used. Okay, so we'll just make sure that we can sort that one out. But these two, and then we'll put this trace back on. Just clean that up. It's a bit of a crappy solder joint, this and wire. So I might actually replace this whole wire with a new bit of wire. Okay, so let's see what we can do for that. So another reason to replace this this jumper is that you can see that it's actually got hot and melted the insulation plastic, which could have been causing some shorts. So that I'm going to be replacing, but this wire will be replaced. I've got some other wire of a decent gauge. It's probably overkill, but I'll use it. So let's desolder this here. So I'll just tin the wire. Get a nice little small what's going on here, so we just pop a little bit of fresh solder on there, and then that's soldered on nicely now. let's get the header pins in. So in it goes like that. What I tend to do is just shove a bit of cloth underneath it to make sure that they're pushing up properly. And then once you've got your first one in, so let me give you a closer look. Okay, so one of the things that you can go wrong here is if you spend too much time on it, you can actually melt the plastic on the other side. So you want to be a bit careful. So I tend just to do one on each side. So pin 1, 2 is damaged, 4 is damaged, so we'll get the wire onto that. 5, we can just tap that on. 6 the same. 7, it's looking interesting, so just be a bit careful with that one. Check 7. Looks like the pad is damaged at the back. So these, the next two, 11, 12 are on a single pad, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17 on a single pad, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22 on a single pad. So we can do them simultaneously. So I'm just going to connect pin 1 and 2 with a leg from an old capacitor that I've cut off, just to create a bit more stability there, stop them from potentially falling out. So I've got it a bit longer than I need it. I need something to bridge the solder basically. I'll solder it onto one of the leads. There you go. So that's now bridged. If you have a look here, I've actually managed to remove the lead. You can see the solders bridge those two pins, so that'll just make it more secure. So the last thing we need to do is to get our jumper wire soldered onto pin 4. Okay, now the trick is going to be to keep this stable, and to do that use my little handy extra pair of hands tools. It can grip onto the wire and hold it in place. Because there's no solder plate on there. So you want to make sure that we don't. I'll have a look if I zoom in. You'll see there's no plate. And we want to make sure that it doesn't short against any of the other. It's a little bit of a fiddly operation. Okay, so balance it right on top. Maybe I should have put a blob of solder on first, but let's see if this works. Okay, let's have a look. So the last thing we need to do is just to clip off the second pin with some side cutters, and you can see it's marked with an arrow there on the board, as well as if you look on the board it says, if you look in the schematics it also says, where is it, here, J3, it says pin 2 is the key. So that's that done. Okay, so we want to check the continuity now. So the connectivity runs from pin 4 through to this leg down here next to Q5, and so that's got continuity, which means it's working. So that's fantastic. Okay, so I'm going to clean this board up and put it back in and see how we go. I'm also probably going to redo this connector. Okay, so the board's now done, refurbed, done the little bits and pieces. If you remember, I've replaced this replacement wire, which was a bit frayed, potentially shorting. I've resoldered here, I've cleaned this all up, redone the header pins on all of these, and checked the transistors, and obviously replaced those headers. So let's put this back in the machine and see if we've done it, if it's now working properly. Okay, so let's get the board back in. Okay, so this is the one thing that I'm not certain about, is whether in fact I'm going to need to repin this connector. If it doesn't work now, that will be my next course of action. But it's a 25 pin one. So let's go, let's turn the machine on and see if it goes bang. Okay, so far so good. So it's interesting, the game is playing properly, but the displays are not working at all. So one step forward, two steps back. Have a look at the displays. They are all sort of glitching out. Have a look at the displays. Glitching out 8 nice and random numbers in there. But you know, flippers are working. Not quite sure where to start, but let's have a look at the connectors. Okay, so you'll remember, as part of me removing this board to reflow the connectors and check things around that, was the fact that I had to there was a bit of a hack job where one of the wires was soldered directly onto the board for the J1 connector here. So I had to resolder that, and when I went and had a look at what was driving, basically the main driver for the displays was in fact the J1 plug. So I went back and checked it, and sure enough, because I was using two connectors, because I didn't have a single connector that was 28 long, I've got two connectors there, and so one of the pins was missed, and so that was causing the problem. So I've simply replugged that in, and hey presto, all the boards are working just fine now, all of the displays. And the better news is also that the ball trough is working too. So look, I don't know whether in fact it was the connector at this stage, whether it was that hack that was shorting or not working properly, but all I know now is that this ball trough issue is fixed. I'm really hopeful that it remains fixed because it's an intermittent problem, but by redoing the connectors, redoing the header pins, reflowing some of the solder on the back of the board, just giving it a general cleanup, things have managed to get better. This has been a bit of a marathon session, which was hopefully, I was hopeful that it was just a simple quick fix of a switch in the ball trough, no such luck. But we got there in the end, I believe, and hopefully we can get into playing this game consistently without issues. So if you enjoyed this series, you can you can subscribe, you can put the little bells for all the future videos that I might have. And thanks for watching, and feel free to leave comments and suggestions below. Cheers and thanks, goodbye.